Samantha's giving Allison a buzz, and we'll, yeah, so why don't we start? This is the Climate Action Committee officially now.
Yes.
Okay, so please, well, let's do a call to order and do the roll call.
Committee Member Cooper.
Here.
Committee Member Larson.
Here.
Committee Member Sear. Here. Vice Chair Smithies.
Here.
Committee Member Way.
Here.
Chair Peterson.
Here.
And Committee Member Martin is absent. Did you hear?
She didn't answer
Okay.
the phone.
She's on her way.
Do you know her? Is that why you have her phone number?
Yeah, she goes to school with me. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had did anyone, let's move on next to minutes from, these aren't minutes of the event that happened here. This is 2 months ago. Did anyone have any comments on the minutes?
No.
I had only one. And I'm looking for my markup. And, work plan. Here we go. So item 6-4, where we talked about outreach to subcommittee update and possible request for city-sponsored sustainability event. I want to actually close that a little bit more than what it says here, because I owe Tom an apology. It was real blindside to him. But we did bring up, I think we need to mention there that we did bring up the opportunity to take this or make a motion, but it was decided not to. And I think one thing we want to continue to keep an eye on is that we need to have a presence at all city events or major city events where we can promote sustainability, and I think we need to talk more about how we do that. Anyway, that was my comments.
I apologize. This looks like items 6.3 and 6.4 aren't complete yet. Is that what yours? There's an error here.
6.4, it just said staff recommendation
Yeah,
request.
yeah, that's-
It didn't seem to have.
It doesn't
any
have- yeah.
discussion.
Correct.
Oh, so there actually
There-
is discussion?
There should be, under 6.3 and 6.4, there's an error here that needs to be
Oh.
fleshed out. I apologize for that.
Oh, okay, so can we,
That's what happens when you wait 2 months. So do you want us to bring these back, or do you want to approve, assuming that we'll add in information on 6.3 and 6.4?
well, it actually would be nice to have it actually reflect what was happening there. So can we?
We can
Is there
bring
a
it
way
back.
for you to distribute that to the committee members and they can respond?
It's better if we bring it back
Okay, let's
next
bring it
month.
back.
Okay.
Okay. Well, and then if anybody
Sorry
else
about
has-
that.
No, that's fine. When things skip around like that, it always makes it more interesting. Okay, so minutes are being held till next time, and we'll approve them along with minutes for this meeting. So that brings us to public comment. I notice we have members of the public here, which is great. If anybody wants to make a comment now, they can take up to, 3 minutes, and it can't really bring up anything that isn't on the agenda already.
No, so this part of public comment is for anything that's not on the agenda.
Okay, so, boy, you think I know that after a year, but anyway. Yeah, so if anybody wants to bring forward something that we don't have on our agenda that relates to our climate action, well, and we'll be talking about our efforts of what we do as the Climate Action Committee. But if anyone has anything, I will even say, related to sustainability in the city of Albany, they're more than welcome to come up and present it if they don't think it's already covered on the agenda. So it doesn't look like anyone's taking that up. So if you want to do announcements.
Sure.
And just to give an update, Allison will be here in like 3 minutes.
Okay.
So.
Perfect. So we'll skip item 4.1 and come back to it. For 4.2, there's a mandatory advisory body training on Monday, February 25th, which is this coming week, at at 6:30, from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. It's in the council chambers. Jeff, do you think that that's still the case? It's advertised as being in the council chambers.
Yes, I believe it's in here.
It is, okay. It just seems like a small space.
Is it this?
This, yeah, it's in this room next Monday at 6:30 p.m. Attorney Kat Wellman will be providing a training on the Brown Act. It's mandatory. If you can't make it, there will be some sort of makeup session. So if for some reason you really can't be here, we'll either schedule another training or do some sort of online training. But we would like you to have some sort of training refresher on the Brown Act, and staff will be there as well, so we can be refreshed. Welcome, Allison.
Hi.
We're just getting started on announcements, and our first I guess the first question is, does anyone have questions about the mandatory advisory body training?
If I could just add, it's more than just the Brown Act. It's all the legal requirements and then some kind of going through the committee handbook and just talking about some of the challenges that committees and commissions have and some of the tools that you can use to deal with challenging situations. So it's hopefully not too boring.
Any different than ones we've had in the past?
Yes. Yeah. We'll be bringing in some new resources and using a little bit of a different approach.
Are you involved? You're involved in that?
Yes.
That's fun. See, it'll be fun. So if we can go back to item 4.1, Allison, if you don't mind introducing yourself briefly.
Hi, my name is Allison Martin. I'm a student at Albany High School, and I'm the new,
New committee member?
Community member at large. Yeah.
Yes, at large.
Great, well, welcome.
Thank you.
We're very excited to have a new member. Always love new blood.
Yeah. The Albany City Council updates their strategic plan every 2 years. So this past January, they held both a work session and a study session to determine what their strategic goals are for the next few years. And the updated draft is, I believe, on their March 4th agenda. The plan itself will ultimately inform your work plan. So you're going to discuss your work plan in draft form today, but you're not going to approve anything because we're waiting for council strategic plan to make sure that they're both aligned. Although we imagine that they are. My understanding from the strategic plan at the moment is sort of, it shifts the focus from the previous climate action plan to the planning process and implementation of the new climate action plan. And those are their big goals related to climate action and sustainability.
I actually have a question about Allison. So,
Yeah.
I mean, this is the first time we've had 2 student members. Is there anything in the charter or, is there any issue with that? 2 representatives from the school district?
No, so actually Allison isn't a representative from the school district. She's a representative at large. The council appointed her at large. So Samantha is our BOE representative, but any of the other positions, council can appoint student members, and that has happened on other committees where students have been appointed. There's no age restriction for being on the committee. You just have to be a resident.
Cool, welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What's our password?
Can you say a little bit about your
You're
interests?
going to have to keep logging in,
Oh,
sorry.
sure.
How you wanted to be on the committee? I think that would be interesting for us to hear.
Yeah, so I'm really interested in environmental issues. After high school, I want to study science and lab work connected to the environment. I'm in the EdSet program at school, which is Environmental Design, Science, English, Technology, and so right now I'm taking AP Environmental Science. I work for a company that is it's a startup that's in the USDA building, and I'm an intern at the company, and we're making biodegradable plastic from methane. And I don't know, it's kind of a passion of mine, and ever since, I also like the intersection of politics and the environment, which until now hasn't been going that great, but I really hope that we can work to make that a better future.
You might find local politics more appealing.
It also just has local influence. But Can you remind me of the password for the,
Dinner with Albany 2010,
oh, that's,
For
Wi-Fi password.
City Hall or City of Albany guest?
Guest. It's all one word, lowercase, Dinner with Albany 2010. For those of you out there in the audience too. Okay, should I move on? People ready? Okay. So upcoming sustainability events, there was a previous event that I think went pretty well. There's an electrification event a couple of weeks ago that was put on by the city of Berkeley and Stop Waste, and then we've sort of partnered with them for outreach to get people in the region to go to this electrification workshop. Lizzie was able to attend. Lizzie's not here tonight because she's at a training in Santa Cruz for Civic Spark. But she was able to go. I couldn't go because I had a conflicting meeting. But I think, Nick, you went.
I went.
Did you want to comment on?
it was very,
The event?
it was very well organized. And also what I noticed was I think Berkeley Climate Action Coalition is very active and seems to have a lot of information
Oh, good.
Related to this, plus contacts to a lot of other people with good resources on electrification. Heard a talk by a fellow who's from sort of the Humboldt area that's been doing commercial, doing multifamily residential, zero carbon, all electric for-profit developers, which was really interesting. It can be done. They make money and they're happy. And so, I mean, it was sort of tip of the iceberg thing, but it was very interesting to see how much is actually happening and how much people are really picking up on this. So it was exciting.
Was it well attended?
Yeah, it was very well attended. There was quite a lot of, I don't know, I mean, it seemed like there were a lot of people there. Did you make it to that, Eric? Or?
No.
Yeah, who else did?
My understanding was the first few hours were during, it was like, 3 to 5 or so was geared toward contractors. And then the 5 to 7 p.m. slot was geared toward residents. So they had these two different audiences.
Right, and I think I attended the presentation that was more for business and professionals, and that was very well attended. I did not go to the one that was more geared towards residential. But there were a lot of heat pump hot water heater vendors and split system HVAC system people and designers, and also entities that do energy analysis and retrofit recommendations on homes. So it was pretty, I've got a bunch of literature that I can possibly share with you, and maybe we can
Yeah.
make it available to others too.
Great.
But I think one thing I thought was really good about it was getting our Albany Climate Action Coalition hooked in really closely with Berkeley Climate Action Coalition. I think would be a good move. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much communicating is going on there, but Berkeley really seems to be, I mean, they're really organized on this part.
Right. Other events, there's a Red Cross shelter management class this Saturday. There's a Friends of Albany Parks cleanup at Terrace Park on March 9th. And this will segue into my next update, which isn't on the agenda, so we can't really talk about it, but I have some good information update on East Bay Community Energy. But there is, in terms of events, next Tuesday, the 26th, at the Community Center at 7 p.m., there's an Understanding Your Bill workshop that East Bay Community Energy is putting on. There's been some,
26th?
the 26th, should be Tuesday, the night after you guys are going to be here. So if you want to go to both, you'll see me at both. But it would be great to have a representative from the committee or the Climate Action Coalition or something there sort of talking about why we think it's important, but I will be there.
This is at the community center?
It's at the community center in rooms 1 and 2.
But it's an East Bay Community Energy event, right, that they're specifically?
Yeah, we're partnering.
Yeah,
We
okay.
sort of I organized it for them, but yes,
Oh, that's
they're
good.
going to put on East Bay Community Energy staff will be there to put on a presentation and answer questions.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad to hear
Yeah.
that's happening.
Yeah. So they've had some bad press recently, some misinformation out there, particularly because they launched right before winter. So the first bills that came out were higher than people's bills the previous month. We've had a couple very cold months. And so people are looking at the difference in their bills and saying, oh, that's East Bay Community Energy. no, it's because their bills are higher. And they actually interviewed a woman in Livermore who has electric heating, and she was like, why is my bill $200 now? It's like, well, because it's winter. So there was some bad press, and then they were able to kind of reconstruct their message, and I think there's better information out there, but they want to put on these workshops and sort of get people to know that if their bill is increased, they should just pick up the phone, or they also have a website that's like an understanding your bill website where you can understand the different charges, so that people don't just automatically opt out. Yeah. So they did have an increase in opt-outs, particularly in Livermore and other East County cities in the past few weeks.
Yeah, I've noticed also, I saw a little bit on Nextdoor for the East Bay area, and
Right.
people, the conspiracy theories, the nanny state taking over kind of thing happens, and then you're kind of, swimming upstream at that point, just trying to explain, hey, this is all beneficial, and it's like,
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like tons are bailing, so that's.
We've been very fortunate that we have Dan Lieberman here, who is
Yes.
a founding member of the Sustainability Committee, because he actually has been paying attention, as a resident, he's been paying attention to the Nextdoor feeds, and he has offered to get coffee with people or talk to people, and I think that's gone a long way for Albany. Speaking of which, my next update is, I think, quite exciting. We finally have some data. Sorry, it's tiny, but Albany has the second lowest opt-out rate behind Berkeley, which is this year 2%. I guess I can't really see. Can you see this? Yeah, 2%. And we also have the highest percentage opt-up into Renewable 100, besides Piedmont, which I'm not counting because that's their default. So Renewable 100 is the default for Piedmont, which is why they're at 89%. But we're second to them at 1.22% opt-up. That may seem small, but it's pretty hard to get people to do anything. And so if this is where we are now, we can continue sending that messaging. It's clearly been working.
So that goes opt-out, opt-down.
This is
stay the
opt-out.
same.
Opt-down is
Right,
less than a percentage point, and then
that's.
96.2% is what is people who are in the
We
default,
used to have 100.
which is
And then,
pretty good.
and it'd be nice if the opt-ups were balancing out the opt-outs, but anyway.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But we're quite pleased with these numbers, and certainly there can be more work to be done in terms of education to the opt-ups.
Is this also including commercial accounts?
Yes. So these numbers are commercial and residential, and the only details I have for residential is for opt-outs. For opt-outs, residential is 130. They're not allowed to give us the commercial because it's under 15, but you can do the math. It's 13. So they didn't give it to us, but they may find out they can't give us some of these other numbers, since we can easily find out. Do the math ourselves, but so that's the update on EBCE. The local development business plan is the other thing that they're kind of rolling out with. So the rollout of the local development business plan was delayed because of financial uncertainties. Early this year, we mentioned the PCIA, which is the exit fee, the CPUC increased. And so East Bay Community Energy has been very concerned about rates and what their bottom line is really going to look like and how much money they have to spend on efficiency programs. But it looks like they're feeling pretty good, and they have some money to move forward with. So between now and the end of the fiscal year in July, they're going to be spending $625,000 on programming that includes supporting existing energy efficiency programs. So that means partnering with Stop Waste and Bayren and supporting things that already work. supporting cities that want to develop electrification and electric vehicle reach codes. So we're excited to partner with them on that.
How does that manifest itself?
They're still working out the details. They kind of are thinking they may just like give everyone a check for $10,000 and say, do what you need to do in terms of consulting or staff time or something. So that's to be determined. But like I said, this stuff is going to roll out quickly. Identifying solar and storage opportunities for local government facilities. That's a Air District grant that they have, which will be very exciting. They're also creating a 100% local renewable program for city facilities. So it'll be the same cost of their Brilliant 100 product, which is what we have now for municipal facilities, but it will be 100% renewable. And the idea is it will raise money for them to actually be able to create additional renewable products in county.
Aren't they supposed to be subsidizing distributed solar within the county?
Yes, I think this is their first program to try to do that, though. They're working mostly with government facilities first, and then it's sort of like the first phase of the program, the sort of low-hanging fruit.
Are they also including, so this is bullet number 4, right? Solar and storage for city facilities. Are they looking at school facilities too?
Yeah, I think I'd have to go back and look, but they may actually use the term government facilities, and I'm saying city facilities because I'm being selfish. I think they are looking at government facilities for solar and storage, which would include schools.
Yeah, because that's something I think we
Yeah.
want to get on is in Albany having, solar as part
Right.
of that program.
Right.
And we need all the help we can get.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's good to hear.
I think they reach out to cities because they already have a connection with cities. They already have this developed relationship. But I think other government facilities, including schools or orientation center for the blind, places like that, could be opportunities for government facilities.
Also, I know the AUSD is building some new buildings. Weren't you saying that Earth Team was working on solar panels?
There's plans for solar. I'm not sure if they're implementing it on all the buildings. I think in many of the situations, they've had the plans to put them in and then decided last minute that there aren't enough funds and cut that out of the plans.
Yeah, just to quickly comment on that, what we're seeing is the district is very focused on budget right now, and so anything that impacts budget in a negative way sort of disappears. At least that's my take, so I'm speaking for myself. So there was solar planned on the new annex for the middle school, and now it's solar ready. So everything, this term solar ready has come up. What we want to do is work with them and get past the solar ready and have it solar functional. So that's a goal of this committee to kind of work on that.
Agendize this, because I think there's a lot more to discuss.
Yeah, are we still under just announcements? Or?
We're still under announcements.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'm going well into detail just because it wasn't on the agenda and I thought it was important to share. But
Okay.
but as an update.
point,
but
Tom.
there
Why don't
is
we
a
do that?
conversation about schools, a school subcommittee later on in the
Yeah,
agenda too.
let's table it for that.
Yeah. Anyway, so they're also going to focus on giving grants to local nonprofits that are doing energy work and providing matching grant funds for any grants that they go out for. So that's the EBCE update. And I think that those are all my announcements. I'm done.
Very creative. Thank you. Okay. No presentations as yet, so 6-1, can we move on to that? To
Sure.
our
Yeah.
proclamation?
So when a committee member leaves, we usually do a proclamation of appreciation. So I'm going to go ahead and, or I guess it's called a resolution in this case. I'm going to go ahead and read it, and then you guys can sign it. Climate Action Committee Resolution 2019-01. It's your first Climate Action Committee resolution. Resolution of appreciation to Robert Urhammer for his service on the Sustainability Committee. Whereas Robert Urhammer was appointed to the Sustainability Committee in January 2013 And whereas Robert served as a member of the committee for 6 years, providing representation as an Albany resident. And whereas through his work experience in seismology, Robert offered expertise. And whereas Robert demonstrated a passion for public health benefits of emissions reductions. And whereas during his term of service, the committee was influential in achieving the city's sustainability goals, including help in the development of East Bay Community Energy and a target for net zero carbon. And whereas Robert is recognized by the committee for his commitment to making Albany a more environmentally responsible city. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the Climate Action Committee does express its appreciation to Robert Urhammer for his service to the city of Albany and wishes him the best in his future endeavors.
Sounds perfect.
Okay.
Do
I'll
we need
pass
to
it
make a
around.
motion on any of it, or?
Do you need to make a motion, or can they sign? There should be a motion.
Okay, I make a motion that the proclamation be
Resolutions
so-
or proclamations usually have a
Have a
motion that
motion.
goes
Yeah,
with it,
so-
just to get in the habit.
Yeah, so I make a motion that the proclamation be signed as just read.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
Pass it down.
Okay.
And there should be a line for everybody.
Yeah. I guess we can move on to the next.
Anything else, or should I move on?
Anybody have any other comments, statements related to the proclamation?
I can move on to Climate Action Workshop debrief and next steps. I'll give you an update and some next steps, and then you guys, actually, we'll start with the Climate Action Workshop in case you guys want to kind of discuss and debrief that portion, and then I have some slides on CAP next steps too. So we were very pleased with our workshop. Sorry, you can't read the images on the photo here, but we think there are probably about 60 attendees in total throughout the night. We had 3 mitigation stations, energy use in buildings, gasoline-powered vehicles, and consumption. They were all very popular. We had some adaptation stations in the lobby, wildfire and smoke, sea level rise and flooding, water scarcity and extreme heat, and they were less well attended in the lobby. I think that might have confused people. And then we had 2 stations, impromptu stations that people decided to create. So we had the environmental protection and repair station and the carbon sequestration station as well. And we got some really good comments and feedback. They were attached to your agenda if you want to look at the notes from the workshop. But the kind of overall takeaways that we saw were really the biggest thing that we saw was green infrastructure and urban forestry are priorities for both mitigation and adaptation. The word that was used the most in all of this, even more than walking and biking, was trees. Everybody said trees all over the place. Vertical gardens, rooftop gardens, urban agriculture, rain gardens, permeable surfaces, water reclamation and gray water, compost and mulch, and native plants were all used a lot as well. In terms of consumption, the big takeaways were less single-use items and more reusables, which we love to hear. In terms of building energy, incentives and promotion of electric space and water heating, people are also very interested in solar panels. They love solar panels. It's very visible. It's got a real resilience benefit to it. Because we have carbon-free electricity, it's maybe not our biggest bang for our buck in terms of emission savings, but solar is still important in terms of resilience. In terms of transportation, pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure was very important. Car-free street days, electric vehicle street parking and charging stations, electric vehicle charging incentives, and also an EV city fleet were all mentioned. So those are our big things, and I'm curious if you want to take the time as a group to discuss your takeaways from the workshop, if there's anything.
Does anybody have any comments they want to make? I mean, I do, but if people want to.
Well, I was really, I thought it was a good event, and I was surprised that there was such a good turnout because it was a very cold, windy, and rainy day. So I think just kudos to the staff for
Yeah.
bringing it to the attention
job.
of the community and publicizing it very well. I don't know how you guys manage that, but, and I thought that there was a lot of energy in the room and a lot of, optimism and, so I was really buoyed by the event. And I think, if we can kind of build on this and kind of tap into that enthusiasm, that would be wonderful. I did have a general comment about this. So one thing I wonder about is that this is a really broad suite of things, and I think of the climate action plan or the inventory as being very narrow in a sense, because it's utility, consumption, and vehicle miles traveled, essentially, with some solid waste. But if we do a lot of these things, it's not going to show up on the inventory, which I'm not saying is a problem. I'm just saying that we should just be mindful of that, and maybe we need to increase our scope and just say we want to go after these things. Because, if we plant all these trees, we reduce our consumption, it's not going to show up anywhere. We don't measure any of those things. So it's just something to think about. I'm not saying they're not great ideas and we shouldn't do them all. It's just, we have our metrics and we have our intents or
I had
goals.
sort of a similar
Yeah.
on that. Did anybody else want to?
Yeah, I mean, I echo what Max was saying. I was surprised at the turnout, and pleasantly surprised. I thought it was great. My biggest thoughts are, what are we going to do with this information? How is the consultant planning on taking that and putting that into the CAP? Because, like Max says, some of these things are not measurable, but some of them are, are good ideas, but aren't really connected to the CAP. So I was curious about what's going to happen to those kind of ideas that don't actually fit exactly in the CAP work that the consultant is doing.
I want to sort of cap on that too. I agree with what Max and Tom are saying. One thing I thought was this was a real enthusiastic, great event. People were really thinking optimistically, and I think there was this vision of a green city with lots of plants and everything's great. I was at the internal combustion engine station and kept trying to say, well, how can we get people to get away from their cars and these other things? And it was interesting. There's sort of a denial of changing your current activities. So I think what I learned out of this is there's a lot of enthusiasm for the vision of a sustainable community, but there's not a very clear understanding of the steps, although we're sort of guiding them to that. And this became even more clear when I went to the electrification seminars, that it's a real challenge, and on top of it, you have huge industry interests that are working against those changes even happening. So the takeaway I had on that was that I think these ideas can be reflected in vision and goal of what the community wants, but I see our consultant as sort of bringing a big dose of reality into this, and what are the real problems we're up against with where our emissions are and what the ways are. I mean, it'd be nice if we could plant enough trees to sequester all the carbon that we're emitting, but it just is a physical impossibility in Albany. So I think in the amount of time we had and the way it was a very positive event, we couldn't burrow down to that level. We just couldn't. It sort of was the happy stuff, and it was, people were kind of getting at it. But I think there's a lot of opportunity there to reach out to people and share, say, hey, there are these ideas, but in order to get there, we're going to have to do these things. And I think that we started to see this in our last year in looking at and all the analysis that Max did. Okay, where are the big chunks and what do we need to do as a community? I mean, a huge thing that has just come up since then is just air travel. It is a huge impact. And this is now something that Carbon Free Albany, you can actually see what percentage of your carbon footprint is your air travel, which is really flabbergasting to some people, so. Anyway, I think the educational aspect is going to be critical in the outreach and bringing everybody past that sort of, oh yeah, we'll plant some trees and solve the problem, to hear the real steps. And we need to have incentives and programs that directly address that. But it was a great meeting. It couldn't get to that level of detail in that time.
Yeah, to start with the positive, I mean, of course, the turnout was amazing. I think it was a good cross-section of Albany, too, and you really kind of got a range of everybody. I also think that it kind of further confirmed that Albany residents want us to promote rather than regulate or enforce, and that kind of ongoing of an issue is how do we put this into the climate action plan. And then I also think, like people have mentioned before, it brings up again, how are we going to maybe look at new metrics for CAP 2.0, and I know we started talking about that like a year ago, but bringing that up again and kind of thinking, how do we want to take this on? Because I think that, we have the opportunity to be very innovative in the way that we go about this. And so it could be, as much as this is a challenge, it also could be something positive, and we can come up with something new that hasn't been done before.
I just want to add, I missed you all that night very much. But I think what this illuminates, one is that there's, from the community, they're highlighting things that are more on the side of resilience and adaptation. And it's also, I think, gives the committee and the city clues as to how to connect with the excitement. Like, start there, and then in the process of those items, get to the tougher ones. But we can build community on the things that people are excited about.
One thing that came up in the building section that Max and I were doing was that I think we lost an opportunity to educate people at the beginning of the meeting about where, in terms of climate action, where are the levers that are going to make changes? Because we heard a lot of things that weren't really related to energy use in buildings or, insulation and those kinds of things. People weren't thinking about that. They were thinking about other things. And maybe if at the beginning there had been just a brief presentation, say, okay, here's some basic facts about the city of Albany. Where are our emissions issues? Where are those coming from? Transportation and building. Not that I don't think it would have quashed the creativity, but I think to put some context in it, because otherwise people were thinking of things that, you just saying, well, everybody's house should be electrified. Okay, but you have to start with conservation first before you start getting, those kinds of things. So I think, when we do this in the future, I think that would be good. Just some basic education, and that would have been an opportunity too to educate the community about some of the issues that the city's actually facing.
Yeah, I think there's a lot we've learned going through. I mean, again, if we could make this an iterative process, and that actually brings up another question. I think this was the biggest community outreach that we'll have on the CAP. I mean, after this, there won't be another, unless there's a presentation maybe of a draft for some comment, and that's about it, right?
Yeah, sort of to be determined, but I think most of the community engagement now will be through your regular meetings. Mm-hmm. Like as the draft comes out and we have a comment period, people can come and speak at your meeting.
So that's something we could actually publicize and almost run as a workshop again if we wanted
You could,
to.
yeah.
I think it would be very good. I mean, one thing I would like to see, I know our consultant, and I don't know if we got one this time or if it was included here, that they're usually giving us every month kind of a summary of, have they done an analysis, or was this put together by the consultant?
Lizzie put that together, but the consultant has used it. And I can give you, I have more slides to kind of tell you where we're going with it.
Yeah. I guess what I'm kind of thinking is it would be nice to see sort of the consultant's analysis of this and how it fits in with what they see per the information that they know that Tom was talking about, with where the levers are and everything. I mean, again, I think part of doing the community engagement is so that there's ownership, everyone feels involved as much as possible, that we get input from the community, know where their concerns and issues are and all that. I mean, it isn't surprising that everybody wants it to happen without them having to do anything, and please don't regulate me, but, you know, the realities of that are going to come up with what it actually is going to take to get to, I think, essentially the zero mark, which is supposedly 30 years away, but in reality should be now. So is that something we can, I mean, is sort of a review of the community input? I'd just be interested. I mean, my worst case scenario is that all of a sudden the consultant swings everything towards, oh, well, the climate action plan now is we're going to plant all these trees all over the place. And, you know, I mean, I'm just wondering how do they merge these things together?
So we've had a variety of public input over the past 6 months, and this is one piece of that. So we have a survey, we've had Climate Action Committee, the subcommittee input, we've had staff interviews, and all of that goes into something. And to answer your question and Tom's question and Max's question, the process for the consultants is, first, they're using this information to help develop some main goals, which we can talk about. I'm going to engage you on in just a second. So this is more about, okay, what are the big priorities? They want to have 5 overarching goals, and less than 20 actions in our plan. So 5 overarching goals with several actions each, and so that's what I'll engage with you on. Once they've developed the goals, then they develop the strategies, and then they develop the metrics for how to measure success. So we've talked, everyone's getting away from the greenhouse gas inventory. That is one thing that we will do for certain items like VMT. We can measure. For many of the items that actually will get us to our goals, we can't measure them in that way. We also can't access data from PG&E, and we may not be able to in the future. We continue to not be able to access the data that we need to do those measurements. So we have to come up with some other metrics to measure success. So those are sort of like the 3 steps: goals, strategies, metrics. Within that, there's some other steps as well that I can go through. But so we could talk first about the plan goals. Go ahead. Yeah.
One more comment. I was at the meeting and someone brought up, so there's a plastic bag ban in Albany. Is that something? Okay. Someone brought up that at the Target in Albany, that doesn't seem to be in effect. Was there something that happened there? Or?
So the plastic bag ban is complicated, and it actually is in effect at Target, but in order to not be sued by the U.S. Chemistry Council, like San Francisco and many other places were, the ordinance allows for heavy-duty reusable plastic bags. So Target's, you'll notice the Target's plastic bags are different than the traditional plastic bags that they used to give out. They actually like pass these tests that you can use them 200 times without them failing. So they are actually in compliance.
You still pay 10 cents for them too, I think.
You still have to pay for it. Yeah. But they're in
Safeway
compliance.
does that sometimes too.
Yeah.
Instead of a paper bag, it's a plastic one.
But overall, there's been a drastic decrease in the amount of plastic bags used because of the ban.
Great.
Anything else on the workshop?
Well, so just the thought I wanted to close on that is that these issues that we've brought up about, okay, this is interesting and it seems at, kind of a level. Our consultant has the smarts and the sophistication to take this and see. I would think they would analyze this and say, oh, there's a certain level of education or there's a certain amount of approach that needs to happen within this community in order to gear people to, going from, hey, we'll plant a bunch of trees to, oh, we need to do efficiency on homes and work certain ways like that. I mean, that's how they're going to cull this information gets culled into. I mean, all these surveys they're doing gives them a feel for what the community's like and how educated and how adept they're going to be at meeting these goals, and then providing us with, hopefully, here are your weak points. Here's where you're really going to have to work. I mean, people are adverse to X, Y, or Z. Seems like that kind of information is what we're really going to need to know in our plan if we're going to have an implementation process that's going to succeed.
Oh, perhaps could we, in the consultant memo, I mean, they address some of this, of how there are different stages and how they're interpreting the information. So maybe we could, to address your concern, we could go on to hear more from Claire's presentation and from the consultant memo.
Yeah, let's, if you don't mind, let's start here, because this is my next slide. I can move around if you want, but the first question is about what the overarching goals of the plan are. What are the big ticket items, so to speak? And there's a lot of ways to cut this, but based on our staff feedback, council priorities, and all of the community engagement we've done, these are the things that the consultant has come up with. We tweaked them a little bit because we added resource consumption. They were concerned about having resource consumption because it's not measurable, and also hard to do. But we actually have to include it because half of our funding is coming from Stop Waste that says they'll fund it if we focus on resource consumption. But we also think it's very important, even though some of it isn't measurable. There are some mechanisms to measure it. They're not perfect, but we really need to address resource consumption when we're talking about climate action. So, but I don't know if you guys want to give any feedback on these, if there's something that you feel like that's glaring and missing.
What does maximize green infrastructure mean?
It can mean lots of different things. I think from the strategies we've talked about so far, one item would be creating a comprehensive, creating a green infrastructure plan, which we have to do anyway, sort of for stormwater, but then also in resilience, and then also creating a kind of master, what would you call the tree plan? A tree master plan are two measures that might fit under maximizing green infrastructure. Also, maybe changing city policies to incorporate green infrastructure into all of our capital improvement projects.
So
green infrastructure refers to planting more trees?
and active transportation, right? Is that what it was?
No,
No.
Could I take that one?
Yeah.
Right, so green infrastructure means any type of infrastructure that incorporates some ecological element to it. So it can be, it's like stormwater retention ponds, it can be permeable pavement, it can be bioswales, it can be utilizing trees, it can be soil restoration. Very often it includes water as a component as well.
Because, I mean, I'd want some analysis done on whether planting trees is the right thing to do in a drought that's only going to get worse. Whether, that is a wise thing for the city. How are we going to grow those trees?
Well, the thought is that we would develop a tree list, and we actually have this already, but maybe hone a tree list that's drought-tolerant trees that are also have high carbon sequestration potential. So that's the idea.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point.
But under the terms of the climate action plan, wouldn't you want to focus on green infrastructure? I mean, there may be some green infrastructure things that are very nice and may have to do with water purity, but they won't do anything to reduce carbon emission or greenhouse gas. is.
They have resilience benefits. So the green infrastructure one is the only one on there that's really focused on both climate mitigation and adaptation.
Yeah, okay.
So the stormwater components really do have an adaptation benefit.
And I had on the address energy efficiency of rental properties, why is it just rental properties? Aren't we talking about all building energy efficiency? I mean, what about just residential homes?
So, yeah, I mean, we can talk about this. That came from our conversations with the subcommittee and council priorities on addressing rental properties in particular because of the split incentive issue. We can talk more broadly about it, but I think the consultants' rationale was focus on electrification in general, and then we can hone in on energy efficiency specifically for rental properties where it's more difficult to do so.
I got it. So, yeah, okay.
But we could have sort of an address energy efficiency, and then under that, a
And
focus
some of
on
these
rental
are sort of
properties, too.
interconnected anyway, so, yeah.
So when I saw the list, I was also drawn immediately to the maximize green infrastructure because I didn't know what the heck that means, and it could mean so many different things. Which, I mean, they may be fine things, but it's quite vague. So I don't like that one. I mean, I understand the need for terseness and brevity, but that's too broad and open. At least I think Stephanie's an expert practitioner, so it locks in very nicely. But I think for a lot of us, and probably I'm speaking for the general public, it's probably going to raise what is that, The other thing is, I think energy efficiency is very broad. And, I mean, if the goal is carbon reduction, and if we really think we're getting zero carbon electricity, which we're not necessarily getting true zero, but it's pretty clean, let's say, then, do we need to focus on electricity? Maybe we do, maybe we don't. But to me, it's very broad, and, I think it's really natural gas. And that's what we've said, or that's what I've been trying to highlight. So, again, I think it's very broad, and it could mean, changing your light bulbs. All those things are fine things, but the carbon impact is lower for some of these measures than others. So that's just the point I wanted to make.
Is there a different term, Stephanie, that's used to describe that, or is that
No,
that's the industry
green
term?
infrastructure is that's the widely used term, but perhaps you could highlight green infrastructure for climate resilience.
I think it's the term that's used in our current climate action plan. I'm almost positive.
It's the standard everywhere, all the other city climate action plans.
Well, it's a very broad
Utilize it.
category. So I think the question here is, can we, in the overall goal statement, focus it a bit more on either carbon sequestration or resilience? Not just. Well, I guess all of it is resilience once you do it. So
We could have a modifier that says maximize green infrastructure for carbon sequestration and resilience benefits or something.
Right. And yeah,
yeah, I
everyone's
think that would work.
raising good points or wanting more detail. But we have to keep in mind these are the overarching goals. If we go on to the next slides, we'll see the more specific measures.
We don't have more specific measures now. We're starting here. But yeah, we wanted to kind of get a sense of what are the big key points, and then they've started to develop the strategies for each of these. But if we're missing that's a really important piece, is if we're missing something from this list, I don't want to, I want to make sure we get that in now.
Yeah. I like that the resource consumption came in, because I think that touches on air travel as sort of, a resource you're consuming, I guess.
That's definitely included.
Yeah. So I think that is something we need to make part of this plan at this point, because if we just did what we're emitting here and went on behaving the same way, it's amazing how that impact doesn't get us to zero. So brings up big questions, but it's good to, this is for a much longer term of the plan. So,
I got a question on
sure, go ahead.
sorry, number 4, where the other, so 1, 2, 3, and 5 sort of give a sort of a positive goal: electrify, increase, maximize, and then the 4 is just address. Is there a reason for making that kind of a non-committal one? I mean, it feels like that should be improve energy efficiency of rental properties.
I'm writing that down because I like that
Yeah,
term better. The reason, we didn't come up with these, the consultants did, but I liked address because right now we don't know how to do that. So I'm not that we know how to do any of these all that well, but that one in particular, we're going to have a focus group with landlords because we really don't know how to approach this. And so.
Well, that was my other thought was 4 also, like somebody said earlier, reason for focusing on rental properties isn't exactly clear, because improving energy efficiency of everything, commercial buildings, residential, rental properties should be the goal. And electrifying buildings and providing infrastructure for electric vehicles should be also part of rental properties. So calling it out in number 4 makes it a little weird to me. So it's like, some way of saying, commercial, residential, rental properties are all in the scope of all of these. Would be my preference.
So are you saying that rather than, oh, go ahead.
I just have a couple comments. First, I was wondering, does the order mean anything?
No, I put numbers up there because I kind of wanted you guys to tell me what you thought was most important.
Okay.
But right now, it's not in.
Yeah, because I think the flow of that doesn't necessarily make sense. And then you were commenting a little bit, but I think that the adaptation element of CMAP isn't really highlighted in these goals.
I highly agree. The green infrastructure is really the only one. And that's, I'm curious what you guys think the best approach is for that, because right now I do feel like that's missing.
Well, I don't know this is generating a lot of consideration in my mind, and I could spend an hour sort of even coming up with a lot of ideas and get them to you. I mean, do we want to, this could go on for quite a long time. We have a lot of other stuff to get to, so.
What I'm going to give you a timeline with some information about what we're doing next, but I'll give you the spoiler now before we move on, which is we're going to meet with the CAP subcommittee in a couple weeks and we can dive into this more, and they can bring a recommendation to you in March. So that's kind of the idea.
Yeah.
Does that work for everybody?
I have a question. Actually.
Sure.
So I noticed that it says increase active transportation and transit use, and then also number 1 is electrify buildings and vehicles. I'm wondering if the committee has more of a priority for getting people out of cars or for transitioning to electric cars.
Both.
It's a great question.
Okay.
I don't know if anyone has an answer.
Well, the order might play a role there, right? If that was above the vehicle one, then maybe that would imply, we want to get people to be more active.
Yeah,
maybe.
so that would be
Yeah.
like a reason to get the order.
Similarly for the last one, some might argue that should be the first one in terms of what I think either Tom or Nick said in terms of conserving, reducing. So that might be higher on the list. But can I just make one other comment? Sorry, go ahead.
No, when you're done, let me know.
Oh, I'm sorry. I may be old school here, but I like, before you talk about goals, like what's the vision? Like, can we have a statement like, this is our vision, we want a zero carbon city or net zero carbon city in 2030, or we want net zero carbon and something about adaptation and resilience? Because I feel if that's stated up front, then we can judge all those versus that vision. Because if the vision is zero carbon, then, again, I don't want to pick on green infrastructure, but that might be slightly lower on the list if it's a water conservation measure as opposed to transportation. So I'm just suggesting that could have a role, just to have like a pithy vision statement, or this is the goal, this is the high-level vision of the plan, or so.
Yeah, we
That
can
would be
come up with
helpful.
something like that. I think there's the overarching goals of both carbon neutrality and adapted to climate change. But then there's the sort of, these goals may get us to that. But we're thinking that the implementation plan will probably be only for 10 years, if that makes sense. So we've got these like overarching goals, but we're looking at like, what can we do in the next 10 years to set us up to get to that place? So some of the items that we may need to get to, maybe the technology is not available yet, that kind of thing, we're going to push off till later.
The other thing I'm thinking about as we're discussing this is the first one is a solution rather than a goal. Right? I mean, the goal could be move away from fossil fuels in
Or eliminate use of
buildings,
fossil
in
fuels.
transportation, or something like that, and in buildings.
Would that also combine numbers 1 and 2?
Well, one's more focused on transportation.
Yeah, I think I'm okay with 2, because I think that is about not what type of transportation. It's, how to use more mass transit, get people to
Yeah.
walk and bike and et cetera. Whereas 1 is, we're trying to decarbonize our buildings and vehicles, because that's where our emissions are coming from.
All right.
I think the other thing that's unclear is whether these goals are for this next portion of CMAP or is it for 2050? And so like kind of dividing between those, and I think that also plays into the idea of like what our vision is. And really like we need to have a vision for 2050, but I think we also need a vision for what our next deadline is, because that's kind of a missing gap between the two. And then the other thing is I think that it would be great if we could have some presentation on green infrastructure, because I think right now we don't know enough about it, or I don't know enough about it to be discounting it. And so I think it would be helpful to learn a little bit more about what that actually means, so we can figure out how that fits into the goals better.
I nominate Stephanie to give that.
Sure, I'd be happy. I'd be happy to. There's so many fantastic approaches for green infrastructure that also like create good spaces for public spaces for the community. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. And to Samantha's point, there's some really great examples out there from other cities on how to have your big goals and indicate timelines, like the long-term goal and then the near-term actions that set you up for achieving the long-term goal. So like the Portland Climate Action Plan does that really nicely. And they very clearly specify, here are our goals, here's our next 10 years. This is what we got to get done in the next 10 years to be on track.
Yeah, so the thought I was having was, I hear what Tom was saying too, some of these seem like that's the solution right there, and then others are more broad. And maybe what we need to do is put these more in a statement where they're the broad goals, and then when you move to the next level, you get the more specific actions that do them. The other thing is, I think anything that's on this goals, they're all equally important, and they likely all work together in order to achieve the final goal of 0. And so if it's on here and it doesn't do that, it shouldn't be on here. So again, I think maybe even the way they're presented, rather than just 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is the highest priority or the lowest priority, it's more like these all are aspects of the plan that need to be met, and they break down into their constituent, more detailed actions.
I think also like that kind of ties to Max's idea of a vision statement. So if you want to put these as like paths towards achieving that vision statement.
Right.
Also, could you pass me the water by any chance?
Yeah.
I am confused about the green infrastructure. On the EPA site for green infrastructure, it says that green infrastructure is a cost-effective, resilient approach to managing wet weather impacts that provide many community benefits. So, it is confusing. So
Okay, I can have some materials for our next meeting.
It's the thing that the community seems to think is the most important, so I want to keep that in mind
Yeah.
here. It's going to be in there in some form.
I want to highlight something Allison said, it was that these are like pathways to the vision. So maybe they aren't the specific goals, but they're sort of the areas of where activity should happen. Like, 1 and 2 are sort of intermingled because it says vehicles and then transportation. But really, maybe Tom's point, 1 should be eliminate all use of fossil fuels. And it doesn't matter whether it's transportation or buildings or wherever it is. So maybe what they want to do is have these pathways that we're headed down. And some of them are, that pathway alone, that's the big hurdle for this entire country. And it's being fought fiercely. And I'm really interested in seeing the consultant come up with how you do it, and even on our little city basis. So, it's nice to just say, oh, we'll do this, but how do you do it? Anyway, I think we've given you a lot of stuff to think about.
This is great feedback. Thank you. We will incorporate it, and then we'll work with the subcommittee to maybe come up with something that they can recommend to you all at your March meeting.
So for Allison's benefit, the subcommittee is Max and Eric right now, is that it?
And Stephanie.
And Stephanie, okay. And with subcommittees, we can't have more than 3 committee members, because if you have 4, then you have a quorum, and it has to be advertised and everything, so. But anyway, we'll get you on a subcommittee.
Can I
Later tonight.
suggest before you wrap up your conversation, you invite the members of the public to?
Oh, okay.
And I still have more slides, but yeah, for this item, if people want
I'm
to
sorry,
speak.
yeah, this is dense stuff, so, and this is the first time we're seeing it, so.
Do you want to invite the public?
Well, are we done? Are you done?
No, but if anyone wants to speak on this particular
Okay, well, why
item
not?
before.
So if anybody in the audience would like to come up and speak on, or put their 2 cents in on what we've been talking about, we would love to hear it. You don't have to, but if you want to, there's the microphone.
She's got drawdown. All right.
Thank you. I was hoping to have an opportunity to speak. That's why I came tonight, to learn from you, but also to give you a little feedback. I did attend the event, and I agree with everything.
Please tell us your name.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Uh-oh.
My name is Susan Clifford.
Thank you, Susan.
And I went to I understand the discussion about the goals, and I'm sure that it depends on more deeper discussion about each item. I remember being in the session about the rental part, and I think one of the things about that was that it was a little bit of a disconnect because they were rentals. So that was one of the concerns, and maybe that's why it emerged as a goal of its own. I'm probably not going to be able to stay till 9:30, but Nick Peterson, I wanted to connect him with someone who is also interested in this kind of conversation. She's a trainer, Barbara Bino, and she recommended this book, Drawdown. So if you've seen it, or it's very good. It's very complete. And thank you for the opportunity to speak. I really wanted to let you know how important it is, what we're doing. I would add one more thing up here, and that's communication with our neighboring cities, because they could probably benefit from your work. And so I think communication is very important as well. And maybe it's a measure, maybe it's a metric and not a goal. Maybe it's how you do it, not what you do. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and with that, why don't we move on to our next, unless,
I don't think we're quite done.
We're not done.
oh, we're not done. I thought-
Sorry, we were just done with that part of the conversation.
Okay.
So the other question I have for you tonight is in terms of, and we don't have to decide, you don't have to decide this tonight. You can decide later on once you've sort of started to see the strategies, but just a thought about once we start developing strategies, how do we develop them, and then how do we prioritize them, rate them, decide which ones to keep? It'd be helpful to know what you think is important. For us, we think these are the criteria: impact, emissions reduction, and also resilience potential, political, technological, and financial feasibility of a measure. If we don't think it's something that we can do here politically, there's no reason to put it in a plan. Support from the community and political support. That means, did the community think it was important in the workshop and the survey, but also looking at co-benefits of certain actions. It's another reason why green infrastructure got up to the top, because of all the co-benefits, but also a lot of the measures that have public health benefits are going to be much more attractive. And then context, Albany's role in state and the regional context. What should we be doing as a small city? What is our role? We believe our role can be, we can be an innovator in a lot of ways, but we also don't want to do something that maybe the state could be doing instead. And so thinking about that. So those are the things we think are most important in terms of prioritizing strategies, and I'm curious for your feedback.
I just have a clarifying question. Could you define resilience and resilience potential?
Resilience. I feel like, Stephanie, I feel like you'd be better at defining it than I am. But
So resilience is about dealing with the impacts of climate change. So even as we're trying to bring down emissions and sequester carbon to fend off worse climate change, we have to be dealing with the impacts that are already happening.
Water rise, fires.
ability to bounce back.
Yeah. Bounce back, survive and thrive.
So I get a little worried about feasibility. Oh, the political will just isn't there, so we'll give up. Technological, that's all solved. It's just a matter who owns the piece of the pie and who wants to give it up. And financial, wealthiest, country in the world. So, rather than saying feasibility, I almost want to say strategy for overcoming political obstacles, for engaging technological solutions, for finding financial solutions. So, it's all feasible if those things are there. The feasibility would, that's kind of cart and horse, so I get a little worried about that. And then support, gaining support is more what it should be. All the options of this are failure, and all the options of failure is everybody loses, and it's a horrible situation. So, although I guess you could just say we're just Albany, so who cares? But if you take this seriously, right? And the idea is we succeed as a community and can be an example for other communities, or we learn with other communities and do this. So I think the fourth one, the context, that also, what Allison, or our public member, brought up was engaging with our immediate community around us, which we are doing. I think we all know here that these plans have a sort of coordinated aspect to them and are shared, and the lessons learned are passed around, but maybe that can be accelerated and be made more proactive. Maybe that's part of our climate action plan, is that we will, I don't want to say steal, but we will share and borrow from communities all around us and work together to join forces in solving these problems.
But Nick, these are strategies for prioritizing. These aren't the goals. These are the things to consider in prioritizing things. These all seem,
Well,
the feasibility.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of jumping past that.
I know. This slide's about, it feels to me like
criteria.
this is prioritizing. It seems perfectly rational. Way to look at it. I'm
Right,
not
so-
quite sure where you're going.
Yeah, so for example, you can come up with many different actions and measures to take, and we need to prioritize them. So then you look at impact is, what are your big ticket emission savings? Feasibility is, has this been done anywhere else? How quickly can we move ahead? then support is what
Well,
have we heard
Yeah, no,
from the public?
I understand that. So
And
anyway, I
context
think we're going to have to
is
challenge some of these
multi-level
things.
governance.
Yeah.
Like what does Albany have jurisdiction or funding to do versus what can we tap into on the state level to make it happen? So these are, I've seen these kind of criteria for prioritizing before. They look,
Well,
from
so
what
how
I've
do
seen,
you,
look quite
so
solid.
when you go into priority and you say, well, we're going to electrify, or what I get really worried about is like, oh, but you might ruffle the feathers of the real estate industry, and all of a sudden everything goes diving down and we're not going to do that. How does that fit under feasibility prioritizing?
Well, these are all things that we have to take into account when we're doing the, figuring out what are our priorities. So I actually think this is a very good list. I don't have any problem with anything listed. I think it's very reasonable. It's, like Stephanie says, it's a standard approach to this kind of thing, so I'm fine with it.
I wouldn't back off on strategies that ruffle political feathers. I guess I'm just saying,
I don't think that's the intent. I don't think it's saying back off on anything. I think it's just saying, here's the categories to consider when you're prioritizing. These
well,
are-
then it could say anything, green, blue, purple. These are good. Yeah, you have to analyze it that way. But I guess I'm jumping a bit ahead and saying I get worried about the priorities being shifted by people not wanting to address certain hurdles like political, financial.
I think it's
Anyway,
more about
I think I made my point.
characterizing the options so that we're aware, oh, this one already has a lot of support, this one is going to be more challenging. And then you know what you're dealing with. So it's just
So
characterizing.
the more
and
challenging one is a lower priority?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, then I don't understand how these are used to prioritize.
Okay,
I guess we're going around in circles. I guess I would view this as there's an article in the paper the other day about, how should we view this issue? Should we view it as a life and death threat, which is imminent and acute, and we need to just go all out, like World War II? Or do we feel like this is something we can manage, we can get through it, we've got technology, we can change laws, we can get there? So I think that's at the crux of this. I feel that Nick might be more aligned to the former, and so I can understand that. But the problem with that approach, I think, is that it's very hard to maintain a level of emergency when this is going to take such a long time, because it's not like a drought emergency where you can say, well, that emergency will be lifted in 3 years. It's going to start raining again. This emergency isn't going to go away, ever, probably. So it's very hard to say, it's an emergency. So it's just a statement of interpretation, and that's kind of what I'm sensing here. But I can see both sides, but I think we should probably move on from it.
And I agree, I misunderstood. If it's just strictly prioritizing, yeah, you can throw them in those buckets, but I get worried about how that shifts things down the priority. Anyway, I think I made my concern clear.
Yeah, and you will be engaged throughout the process of prioritizing.
Oh,
The entire committee will be. So if that helps. But it sounds, we can move on because it sounds like.
I had one quick
Oh,
comment.
sure.
I was just going to say that I think that support could almost, and community support could almost fit under feasibility. And I think that those kind of fit together. And then the other thing is, I think context doesn't really clarify, like, maybe I'm just misinterpreting context, but more emphasis on like the resources that we have based off of our context, which I guess is kind of already in there. It's more implicit than explicit. And then the other thing is I was just going to say that in addition to kind of how we identified our main goals, I think it would be great to clearly identify what are co-benefits that we're focusing on, because it really is broad to say just co-benefits in general, and we really have to focus on, like we're saying, health impacts. Is that something we're putting it over economic, and kind of clarifying that too when we're thinking about prioritizing.
All right.
I think the way that context is used in this is we shouldn't be, it would keep us from focusing on something that we don't really control, or that, as Claire was saying, if something that a state is doing, like the mileage standards. We wouldn't come up with mileage standards for cars bought in Albany. So it's what can we do?
Okay.
What changes can we bring about that's relevant to our role as a city?
That's how I was thinking about it originally, but I like your point, and I think we can add this in. Correct me if I'm wrong. The idea is, so it's Albany's role in the state and regional context, but also what are our strengths? We play to our strengths. Is that what you're adding to it? And we had talked about that in the subcommittee. So I think those both can fit.
Also, someone mentioned that, was it you that said the community support could go in feasibility? How would community support be measured? How would we find out exactly how willing the community is to pursue this solution?
Much of that will come from the survey that we did in the fall and the feedback we got in the workshop. And then generally, we actually have a pretty good sense of certain items, like, for instance, transportation, bike and ped. Lots of community support for that. There are community groups that focus on active transportation. So some of that stuff we kind of intuitively know, and some of it's things that we got from our community feedback.
Okay, and this is just kind of a follow-up to something you said. The bike and ped transportation, do we have any jurisdiction over actual like bike lanes, or would we coordinate with Parks and Rec? Or is that something they do, or is it another?
So the Traffic and Safety Commission and ultimately the City Council approve bike and ped projects. So it wouldn't be your committee, but our thought is that for the climate action plan, in terms of active transportation, what we'll do in the climate action plan is identify some goals for a new active transportation plan that will then be vetted by the Traffic and Safety Commission. It could potentially have input from your committee as well, but I think we're not going to have specific. We're not going to identify specific projects necessarily in this plan. More like create a new plan with these goals, if that makes sense. Anything else about criteria? Okay, I'll be quick. So next steps. So there is a memo from Cascadia that's attached to your agenda, so I recommend looking at that. This is sort of an overview. I apologize, it's kind of hard to read with the white lettering, but I'll go through it. This month, you're reviewing goals and evaluating criteria. Thank you. And the subcommittee will discuss, probably in early March, we'll discuss strategy and define carbon neutrality. We haven't actually had a conversation about what the carbon neutrality looks like. So maybe within that, taking on Max's point, I think the subcommittee could draft a vision statement too, as part of that conversation. Also, we're meeting with our consultant for a couple of strategy sessions. So we had one last week, and we're going to talk to them next week about consumption in particular. And then we'll continue to sort of hone in on those strategies after we meet with the subcommittee. Then in March, the subcommittee and staff can give a presentation on and sort of recommendations for, those refined goals, initial strategy development, and definition for carbon neutrality and a vision statement, all of those things. So we'll have kind of a meaty work session in March, I imagine, with the committee that will really help inform kind of a draft plan, almost like draft strategies. In March, we're also meeting with focus groups. So we're going to meet with landlords, strollers and rollers, and other active transportation advocates, businesses, and we're going to have a green infrastructure focus group, including urban foresters, landscape architects, et cetera, stormwater folks. In April, the committee we kind of envision that there'll be a list of strategies that you'll approve maybe in April, something like that. I don't quite have that vision yet. And the consultant will review strategies for impact. So they'll review them for emissions impacts and for co-benefits and all kinds of other things, and help look at that list of criteria and prioritize them. In May, the consultant will actually have a draft ready that the committee can review, and we'll do a public comment period where people can come to the committee and provide feedback or provide written comments on the plan. At the same time, BAE is going to draft a funding strategy for the list of strategies that we have, and Cascadia will work on an implementation plan which will include looking at metrics. So those are all conversations that we definitely want to vet through your committee. In June, this is kind of that seems like a ambitious timeline, so it may get pushed off, but ideally in June we'd come to you with a draft plan for approval, but that might get pushed to later in the summer. And then it goes to council for review and adoption. So that's the overall timeline. Any questions about that?
In March on the focus groups, who is coordinating or organizing the focus groups?
I will be doing that. I haven't done that yet. Would you like to be invited to any of them? Is there one that
Yes, very much. Will the consultant also be there?
Probably not. We may have a local representative there. I'm not sure. We haven't talked about that yet.
So it would be us getting the input and then passing it on to the consultant?
So the plan is for staff to coordinate those focus groups. The consultant is providing us basically discussion questions, but then staff will take notes. And we'd love to we can't have lots of you there because we want to keep them small, but we'd love to have a representative from the committee at each of these meetings. They will be during the daytime likely, so I don't know if that's a struggle for some of you. But if you're interested in a specific subject matter, you can let me know, and we'd like to try to coordinate with you.
Oh, okay.
My concern with having these in the daytime is that I think you're going to limit the community organizations' participation, like Strollers and Rollers or ACAC. You know, if people have day jobs, it's going to be hard for them to participate in a setting like that.
Also, we're going to be in school.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the challenge is we don't actually have the capacity to do 4 evening meetings. I don't think that's reasonable. And typically focus groups are done during the daytime because they're usually like a very small group of stakeholders, often people that are doing something related to their job anyway. But
When do you plan on having sort of a target date for these? I mean,
sometime in March.
well, but if we knew ahead of time when it was, I mean, if people have more advance notice, maybe they can arrange their schedule accordingly.
Oh, no, I'm going to reach out to the key stakeholders and make sure they're available before setting a date.
Oh,
Also,
I think you should at least try to do a couple after, like an evening thing, because otherwise you're going to have the business community and the realtors weighing in more heavily than you will others in the other community groups. And I think that's going to be a problem. Because the idea is to talk about feasibility. That's going to skew it.
Well, actually, no, the idea is actually to get landlord input. So we want the landlords or the business communities only. That's kind of, it's not a community meeting. It's not an open public meeting.
No, you misunderstand what I'm saying. And I think that's very valuable, having focus groups for the business community and realtors. What I'm saying is you're not going to, by doing it to the daytime, you're not going to be able to accommodate community organizations that also should be part of focus groups.
We'll figure it out so that we get everybody's input. We're not going to skip input because of our artificial schedule constraints.
Okay, good.
so maybe there's like a minimum number of participants that you want to have on hand or something like that?
Oh, I'm
To
curious if
metric that.
there's particular organizations, Tom, that you think need to be engaged in this that we're missing.
Besides Strollers and Rollers, I would say ACAC, because ACAC is a combination of not just Strollers and Rollers, but others in the community. So
Where would they fit on this list?
well, you've listed, you have in parentheses, landlords, Albany, Strollers and Rollers, business associations. So I would say, add ACAC to that list.
These are specific topics that we have specific questions for them. What specific questions would you want to engage ACAC on?
I would say,
Well, is the consultant providing the questions or?
Let's see.
We've chosen these particular subject matter. I think what's throwing people off is that I said strollers and rollers. It's really an active transportation conversation. It's not just strollers and rollers. There are 4 subject matters that we think we need to get more input on,
So,
which are getting input from landlords, getting input on active transportation, green infrastructure, and input from the business community.
Yeah, so I trust that staff will schedule the meetings at an appropriate time based on those focus group members' schedules. I think that message has come through, and I totally trust that that you can do that. And I understand, right? We have the community input. Then we have these focus groups on specific issues, and then we have like this committee, so this outreach on particular issues to different groups, and then it gets all put together.
I think that's it. Yeah, all right, yeah. That's it for this item.
oh, okay, so we're at 9, we're at 25 minutes.
What about community
We got a lot
comments?
on here.
What about comments from the community or the attendees?
Again, yeah, any comments from the community on this? No? Okay, thank you. So we are done with this 6.2? Can we move on to 6.3 now? This was kind of outreach subcommittee, of which didn't meet.
I met with
Did you
Lizzie,
guys- Did
so
you
I can
guys
talk
meet?
on that, yeah.
Okay. go
Do you,
ahead.
I can give you an update on Carbon Free Albany first. So we launched the platform last month. We have 34 homes out of our goal of 250 by Earth Day, and 4% progress to our carbon reduction goals. The top team is the Solar Warriors. I'm wondering if anyone up here at the dais is part of the Solar Warriors. No?
I think I made that one.
That sounded like maybe Nick.
Hey,
And our top community group is ACAC. But Lizzie has been doing a ton of promotions, and Samantha, you can give updates on that, but she's been doing presentations to various community groups and trying to get the word out there, but it has been a struggle to get people to sign up. I'm not shocked. It's really hard to get people to do anything. But I think we have a lot of faith in the platform itself. And so I think it's really important, though, to focus on how do we get people involved in it. And so, Samantha, if you want to take that away.
Yeah, I talked with Lizzie last Wednesday, I think. I think another thing that we were talking about was the idea that this is a long-term thing, and so while it's important to reach our goal for Earth Day, it's also something that we can continue to engage on. And so, we can continue to think about really what's going to work well. She was saying that tabling might be something that we need to explore more. The biggest thing is that if the computer isn't really in front of someone to sign up then, it's much harder for them to then go home and then decide to make that action because it isn't yet really phone, it doesn't work on your phone well. And then I can talk a little bit about what we're doing with the schools right now. So the plan is that I and probably a group of other students will be going around to basically every student by going to the advisory classrooms, which are like Wednesday and Friday periods with a computer cart. So students will sign up. There are some challenges with kind of engaging students that we're finding. The first one being that this only really works for Albany residents, and it's kind of unfair to pick out students who aren't in Albany, and so if that comes to extra credit, what does that look like? And then also there are students in Albany who live under a different address that they might be registered under, so that's another challenge. And then also that the account is meant for families, so kind of figuring out if you're making something the student does, how does it get back to their parents? So there's a lot of things that we're kind of tackling, but we definitely have the understanding that it's a long-term process, and we're thinking about how to continue to tackle these as an continuing thing.
Also, like, some students don't have super stable living conditions, so yeah, not everyone has a.
Definitely.
well,
What about it?
thank you.
Oh,
That's
oh,
good
right.
you guys are
We're-
doing that kind of action.
When is that? Next? Not this Monday, but March 4th? Not this Monday, but the Monday after, March 4th. We'll be giving a presentation. Lisa, the CEO, I guess, founder of this platform, will be giving a presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susan.
Thanks.
Susan.
Good night.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Lisa will be giving a presentation on this platform at council on March 4th, too. Early on in the agenda. Is that it for?
Well, I had some thoughts. I think, there should be a real focus on outreach, and I think we'll continue to do it. And thank you very much for pushing it through students and getting their involvement, too. I think, if it's, I know it's always challenging, but if it's just possible to make it where they can, if it's an easy thing for them to do, they can do it, or just help out, or something like that. I don't know if, trying to make it something that the school stands behind, then there has to be fairness and all that, and I understand that. I also think we need to work with ACAC on trying to get some events going, and another thing I'm trying to do is coordinate with the CERT group, because I think this kind of communication that happens amongst sort of neighbor groups fits in with what they're doing, and this is certainly resilience building too, as people, part of what's good about being more energy efficient and hopefully backed up by solar is that you're able to withstand certain kinds of problems that might happen during emergency incidents. So I think there's organizational processes going on with CERT that parallel what I think could happen with an outreach to do this. So I'm kind of talking to the people that are running CERT to try to do that. But again, I think, it's getting that, I think a lot of people in Albany still don't know about it and would probably sign up if they knew about it. So again, it's just a lot of hand-holding probably needed. Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I think Samantha's idea with the school is a great step towards that, because my idea of how to get people in Albany to know about things like this, I feel like a lot of people move to Albany for the schools. So I see the schools as kind of like a hub through which to contact every single person in Albany, basically. And so I think that's a wonderful way to get people to sign up.
Yeah, it's great, and it may take people a few tries. I know, I'll confess, as soon as I got the link, I sat down, I started doing it, and then it's like, oh, I can't remember my PG&E password. So that's nothing to do with the website's really great. But there are those little steps. I'm like, okay, I'll have to remember that or reset it. And but I love the student engagement. Even if they can't complete it all themselves, it really builds. And I wonder if you all saw the video of the Belgian students walk out, climate action.
Greta, do you know the girl Greta?
Yeah.
She's amazing. Her speech at she's amazing.
So, yeah, it would be nice if somehow there was, more of a, people could come over and show groups of neighbors all at once, and everyone could do it in like kind of a little laptop.
Yeah, I think we were talking about
Otherwise
with
or
tabling. So essentially, like, we'd go to the library and have a computer and be like, this is how it works. We'll walk you through signing up. Or at the community center, or, with students at the school library, and different locations. If we can get, internet access at a farmer's market, I think that's another great place. But really, like, having a system where there's a person who can help you and a computer right there.
Yeah.
Also, maybe in the Albany Library, we could have.
Yeah.
Was that what you just said, or?
I think I mentioned it, but yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I guess we don't have any public comment on this. Okay, so let's move on. Review of council-approved statement of purpose. This is kind of hashing over our new name.
If you'd like to, you're
No,
welcome to.
no, I'd rather get right to the,
But this is for your, the conversation about your work plan. But you do have a new purpose. We actually don't see that we see it as kind of more focused based on feedback from the committee over the past couple of years about really wanting to focus on climate action. But we don't actually see it changing really your tasks at all, because pretty much everything you're working on can fit in climate action anyway. But the purpose of the Climate Action Committee, which is your new name, is to serve as a technical advisory committee regarding matters related to climate action, and to advise council on matters related to reducing greenhouse gases and adapting to climate change, which fits quite nicely with the CAP 2.0 plan. So that is your new purpose. And then I can go through the rest of the work plan, but I want to give you a chance to.
What was approved by the council?
That's what's approved by the council, yes.
so does this, I mean, before we had that, part of our purpose was to do outreach to the community. So is that implied in, or is it just only to do technical advisory committee to the city council? We don't do outreach to the public?
It doesn't say that in your purpose. It doesn't preclude you from doing outreach to the community. But it's not your main role. Your main role is an advisory body to council and technical. But I think that with the CAP, there's a lot of outreach in there, and so there's a lot of opportunity to continue to do outreach.
Well, I'm thinking more, like the idea of promoting the carbon-free Albany and trying to get more going on there. If we come up with methodologies for doing that, is it really us to do that, or is it really more pushing that off onto groups like ACAC?
I think it makes sense, actually, for ACAC to take on a big role in that.
Yeah, okay.
Are we going down this into the, is this?
Yeah, we can. I was going to go do an overview. I just wanted to give you a chance to.
Because I was going to Nick's point,
Yeah.
reading forward.
Sure.
The first bullet point in the policy review and initiatives, I was happy to see that it says, at the last part, and determine committee role in plan implementation. And Nick, I don't know if this is the right time or place to talk about that, but I was kind of along the same lines about what the scope of this committee can be, and that seems to open the door to community outreach, or, I don't want to say too much and then have it redefined, but that feels like it's a place for discussion on what the scope of this committee could be. I don't know if you had seen that, but that was.
Yeah, well, again,
Encouraging to me.
I think we've talked about these kind of things before, whether we're an action committee or more policy committee. And I think what the city council is kind of saying is a more sort of technical advice policy committee, and actual activities. It determine committee role in plan implementation. Well, we review consultants and, launch them onto contracts that then provide information to the city, I guess. But I mean, doing more ourselves, manning tables and reaching out and calling people and doing things, that always has been more like it would be in maybe, well, that was what Max started the whole original, was it before ACAC? It was
ACRAT.
ACRAT, yeah. ACRAT, now ACAC. But anyway, anybody else have thoughts on that? I mean, again, part of my reason being on the committee was that I would do something and achieve something and not just be a policy wonk. But I kind of liked when we had in our statement before that we did outreach to the community. Certainly, we are involved, and we did in just last workshop that we had happen, but it doesn't seem, again, that's our consultant could have done that workshop, and we didn't need to really be involved. So what's I guess I would like staff's interpretation of that. If we determine our role in plan implementation.
It means when the plan is done, you determine what your role is in implementing the plan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think the purpose is really clear, and all the committees to city council are advisory committees. I mean, that's what those committees are. Actually, in their scope of work from 2019 to 2021, there's a lot of promotion that's spelled out in there,
Yeah.
which is a more active role beyond an advisory body. But I think we just have to recognize what these committees for city council are. And if there's any, but being on that committee doesn't mean
Yeah,
your
and you can do
policy
other
wonk,
things, yeah.
but it means you're giving input to council
Right.
and bringing in expertise, and any other action with the community can go along with that, or can be done beyond the role of the committee.
What I'm more concerned about in terms of the 2019 to 21 is that in the past, we've also been involved in reviewing major projects in the city and having input in,
Around
development projects.
sustainability, yeah.
And the other thing that's not mentioned here that we have been involved in the past is waste minimization and issues around pollution and chemicals and things like that. So the ban on the plastic bags or the smoking on Solano and those kind of things. So that's gone from this, and I would think that, we should, because you're talking about a three years here, there are things that are going to come up that are going to be beyond the implementation of the cap, issues that we may want to address with the recommend to council take actions around issues of pollution that aren't directly linked to the cap.
Yeah, and on that point, I guess I was first responding to just the role of a committee. But yeah, I was honestly really disappointed, even though I'm on the Climate Action Subcommittee. I was really disappointed that the scope of this committee was downgraded from sustainability to only climate action. Even though climate action is pretty big, it is not everything.
Actually, I spoke at the council meeting, and as we all know, we didn't really get much of a notice. What was interesting at the council meeting was that the commissions and committees that had notice, people showed up, like the Arts Committee, and the council listened to them and didn't change their scope or their name. So, it's very possible that if we had had more notice and more of us could have come and spoken, that might have swayed the council. So I know that's water under the bridge, but I think what I spoke to was that that I thought it was undemocratic, the way this was done, that the council should have asked for our opinion about changing the scope, let alone the name of the committee. And I think that's a big mistake because, like I said, because there were two committees that didn't change because of that, because they had people at the meeting. So I would propose that, I don't know if this scope prevents us from addressing all the other issues associated with sustainability that aren't part of addressing climate change.
Well, I don't know. You haven't mentioned any yet that aren't included. So I think the development review development projects as they come up. There's no guarantee there will be any between now and 2021, but we'll put that on your work plan as something that you can review. For the waste reduction issues, I think that those are very relevant to the CAP, but I think the challenge we're facing with your work plan is that we don't know what you're going to be working on because we haven't finished the CAP yet. So we added a few things that were very clearly things that you can continue working on, but then the hope is that we'll actually revisit your work plan when you look at the implementation plan. And so waste reduction initiatives that are in the new CAP will be things that could be on your work plan. Does that make sense? We don't want to put just like these general broad categories. We want to have actual projects that you're going to be working on.
You know, I tend to agree with, I mean, these comments all came up. Stephanie, I don't think you were here when, you know, at the nth hour, we're all starting, and oh, by the way, this is what, you know, it seemed to me it came from the city manager, the city council at the last minute with nobody being able to say anything. We certainly weren't invited or notified. And it was just told, this is the way it is, and this is what the city council wants you to focus on. Fine. I mean, to some degree, what I do like about it is it underscores the urgency, which some of us have felt there should be this urgency about, you know, the climate action plan. It's all nice to talk about other things, and sustainability and a broader thing are fine, but they're falling by the wayside as we get inundated with, you know, things that we need to do to just make sure we don't ruin the planet. Through the climate change. So there's an overlapping that we could kind of merge in. I mean, our staff has been telling us, well, it seems like this matches with what you have been doing. If there's something we have a great concern about, I think we could make it come under, or we could justify it in some way that it's under the purview of affecting the climate, bettering the environment. So if we were truly passionate about something and we wanted to bring it forward, we could, you know, the city council could always tell us it's not your mandate and not listen to us. But I think we could still do it if we all collectively felt that way. But anyway, that's sort of my thoughts on it. I don't know if anyone else had any. I mean, I think the focus is where we are. We should put our energies towards it. Again, coming in and advising city council, like you say, until we get the plan and what our consultants have said, there's not a whole lot we can bring forward unless we come up with ideas of how to roll things out more, get the citizens more engaged, or have something that'll energize people more, some recommendations on green building codes or whatever, which I think you still have in here, right? Yeah, review options for green building research codes or REACH codes. So does anybody else have any other comments on that? Or, I mean, we can kind of bemoan the fact it happened, but it happened, and it was sort of a political coup, but that's how it went down.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, yeah, you can slip in a lot of things under climate action, and we can always formally, I see, submit a request for amendment to advisory body work plan, if indeed there's something specifically that we want to tackle.
Yeah. Okay, well, we've got 3 minutes left, and we still have a lot here, so where are we
We'll
at?
bring this up back again next month after we can incorporate council strategic plan goals.
Do we have to provide this to city council by some date?
Eventually.
Oh,
But-
that's a pretty broad date.
Well,
the whole future is ours.
usually it's earlier in the year, but because of the strategic planning process, we're kind of waiting for that. So I think I'm imagine April-ish timeframe.
Probably April
Yeah.
or May.
So we
Okay.
can, I mean, if people want to mull over this and.
Yeah, if you want, yeah, and then bring us comments next month. If there's
Or would
anything.
you rather
You can email me comments too, either
one
way.
to you and you can, then we can do it?
Yeah.
Sure, okay, well, let's do that. Any public comment on that? No? Okay, thank you. So our last item here, establish school subcommittee. Can we do it in 2 minutes? Can we go like 5 minutes over on that?
I've got a hard stop at 9:30.
Yeah,
I got a work
okay.
commitment I got to go to.
We could still,
Do you want to switch the chair election and then do subcommittee afterwards?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because do we have to do that now, or could we put, I guess we're supposed to, huh?
Yeah. You can do both of them very quickly.
Okay, let's do it.
Which one are we doing?
So the way the chair and vice chair process works, someone would nominate a chair, someone to serve as chair, and then you would vote on that, and then someone could nominate a person to serve as vice chair.
Okay, well, I would like to nominate Samantha Smithies as chair. She's been an excellent vice chair, and I think she's very capable and competent, and knows our procedures very well now, having been here for a while. I realize she's a graduating senior, and that means her tenure would be somewhat brief, but I think it's a critical time, and I think she has her finger on the pulse and would be a good person. Any seconds?
I can second that.
Thank you, Allison.
I'd like to nominate Max as chair.
So the Robert's Rules of Order process is to vote on the first motion on the floor, and then depending on how that plays out, then a new motion can be made for chair if that doesn't pass.
So we have one nominee.
You have a motion and a second for Samantha. You should vote on
Oh,
that.
all in favor of Samantha being a nominee? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Do you want me to, I'll just call roll real quick.
Is-
Is that easier?
Can we not hear from the candidates about?
Well, they're only becoming a nominee. They're not becoming that position.
So
Right.
maybe another way to do this is have a discussion first and then make motions, if that's the way you want to do it. And then,
Why-
but again, you can only have one motion at a time on the floor.
Let's put it,
Sorry, can I, Eric, did you have to leave?
Yeah, I have
Because I
a-
also have to
I have a work
leave,
thing that I
so
have
I'm
to-
not sure we can do this in 2 minutes.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like
Is it possible to defer this one?
I don't know, do we
Unless we
have,
think we can do it in 2 minutes. I mean, I'm just not sure.
just do it next time, just carry over?
It's discretion of the committee. You should do it next meeting. If you can't do it now, you should do it at the beginning of the
Well,
next
let's make it
meeting.
the very first item next meeting. Actually, I should have looked at how these were put together. I mean, certainly some of these other things could have rolled over a little bit.
Time to each one.
Yeah. Okay. So,
For the people who stay, do you want to do the school subcommittee thing? You still have a quorum.
Yeah.
yeah, let's do that.
So I think that we need to have an official school subcommittee. I think we don't really need to go over why. I mean, we can, but I think it's pretty acknowledged across the board. And I wanted to be on it, and then I was thinking that it would make sense for Allison to join.
What's the purpose of the committee?
Yeah, sorry, I can clarify. So I think that it would be better to have more focus on the specific connection between the subcommittee, the committee and the school board, and then administration at different school sites pertaining to energy efficiency, renewables, solar kind of fits into that, and then also waste reduction. And I think that given that the school district in general hasn't really prioritized these, and there's a lot of low-hanging fruit left, it's important to have some connections with people who are actually committed to getting things done. If that makes sense.
I mean, I think it's a good idea. My concern is that the city doesn't have any control over the school district, and we're an advisory body to council. So would this subcommittee make recommendations that would then go to council? How would that work?
We could,
Yeah, I think there is a bit of a disconnect between that. I mean, maybe I think it's not necessarily fitting into how we advise city council. It's more just like this is something that we're promoting. So it might not fit well into our work plan.
Well, I think the idea was doing kind of an outreach between the city and the district in order to promote a more aggressive, or not to tell them how to do things, but to assist a more aggressive implementation of especially, of energy efficiency, of alternative energy sources. It could even lead to cost savings for the district that they're not pursuing. We just don't, I see all the districts around us having more happening around alternative energy and energy efficiency, and Albany isn't doing it. Even in our new buildings, they're solar ready and they don't have solar on them. So it is not being prioritized by them to be something that is important. So it's trying to see if there's a way we can assist in bridging a gap, providing knowledge, input, whatever, motivation.
I think I see Samantha's proposition in her of intent for the subcommittee, and I also think it's good to highlight that it could be more of an outreach thing and like communication thing, and as you point out, an education thing for the administration and school board. So just trying to make sure that our purpose is high up on their, that their, oh my gosh. Their priorities. Their priorities include our priorities, and just getting that communication going.
Did we not have a school subcommittee prior? Right, we've already had one.
Yes.
Now, Robert was on that, and there was one, and the idea was they were invited to review, I think it was the annex project, and look at, and try to help with making sure sustainable. Well, there was a whole group that was promoting sustainability in new school projects, and one of our members was
Yeah. And as far as I was aware, it was pretty much led by Charlie Blanchard, who was a previous school board member. And so now there's kind of less of an emphasis across the board. But I was going to say that this would really just be putting a formal title. I'm sure Allison and I will meet regardless of whether or not this subcommittee exists. It puts a clear route to actually bringing up what's happening at the schools in connection with the sustainability committee, and it's easier to update when there's an official school subcommittee.
Yeah. I mean, might it also cover just activities and interests of the students and making some kind of connection to potentially getting students behind certain, like you're doing with Climate Free Albany. I mean, using schools as a resource to get information out.
It sounds like an outreach committee.
Yeah. I mean, in a sense, it's specifically focused on, I mean, the schools are one part of our community where it seems like a lot of people meet, a lot of people interact, and having a group that's focused on that and getting information out back and forth, both to the district and to the individual schools, high school, middle school, and the primary schools. It could be a whole process of making the whole community more aware.
Perhaps with regards to the climate action plan, the school subcommittee could be a liaison for information gathering to bring back to this committee and to provide input to staff and council to help with implementation of the climate action plan. That would make it clearly connected with the mission.
If I may add just a comment, with respect to the construction projects that the school are undertaking now, their organizational structure is hard to nail down, and it will be nothing but frustration to you to try to influence the design and construction of their schools. I wish you could. I would wish I could help you do that, but I'm here to tell you it's nothing but frustration. And I don't think there's anything this committee or even the city council can do about that right now. Perhaps with the new superintendent, and there will be some energy put into organizing them a little bit better.
Yeah.
That's my editorial statement.
Also, I'm on the Student Equity Advisory Council at Albany High School, which is basically a monthly meeting with the superintendent and some other students. So if we did want communication with the superintendent, as she stays in the district for the next couple of months, I can facilitate that.
Well, so I guess the question on the table is, this would be a way to interface with the school, which is a large chunk of sort of what Albany community is. Is that under our purview as being a advisory committee to, I mean, it seems like it brings information to us so that then we can advise regarding things that relate to at least the student citizens of Albany, and also to some degree how the climate action plan interfaces with the school district and the schools, which are a significant part of the Albany community.
Do we need a motion?
I think a motion to formally form the subcommittee would be great.
Okay, then I make a motion to reinstate the school subcommittee.
Does it need a second?
Yes.
We can second it.
I'll second that, yeah.
Thank you. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any
So
abstain?
it's Allison and Samantha are for the time being.
Yeah, so for
And
now.
there could be one more if there's
Could
someone
be
who's
one more
interested.
if someone becomes interested. Okay, thank you very much. So no public here anymore, no public comment on that. Any,
We're in overtime.
I think we can adjourn now, right? Meeting adjourned.
Unless you want to talk about future agenda items, but we have plenty for you.
I think just our carryover is going to do it. isn't
I
it?
just want to make sure that green infrastructure will be, well, yeah, you've got that written down.
Okay,
Okay.
yes, I can do that. I can do that.
And then can we just make 6-1 the election of chair and vice chair? I'm sorry.
We can, the reason we do it at the end is because then you elect a chair and the chair has to run the meeting if they're not prepared to run it. But yeah, we can do it at the beginning.
And you
Yeah,
can,
And you can decide to defer them to the next meeting or not.
Yeah, I think we just had too many loaded stuff here. Oh. Yep.
On the time.
yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Sorry I was late.
Let's just send to Samantha.
Great to have you join.